Hi, my name's Jeff Nichols. I'm the writer and director of the Bikeriders.
I'm Tom Hardy, and this is Freeze Frame with British Esquire UK.
You're a grown-up, man. You got a house, you got a job. I don't want that. I don't care about none of that. See, that's why it's you. Huh? You, who all these guys here, they're all trying to be. You see? You see? Sorry. It's yours.
Come on, that's amazing.
It worked for you, mate. That's what matters, you know?
Certainly did. You know, that wasn't supposed to be a two-shot. That was supposed to be an over-the-shoulder. We had a Steadicam operator. You know, Austin's back, and here comes Tom, and he keeps coming in, and we keep wrapping around so that it becomes a two-shot, which would be completely fine. You're on a Steadicam. You have that freedom of mobility, except for the fact that we're shooting on film, and we spent all day lighting it. And so we put this crane base right in the background in the center so that it could have this kind of sodium light over their heads. And, you know, I just cut back to earlier in the day when my cinematographer was like, where could we put the base of the crane where no one's going to see? I was like, just put it back there. We're never going to see back there. And then Tom keeps getting closer and closer. I'm like, oh, here comes that crane. Here it comes. But we kept it just out of frame. And it became, you know, one of my favorite scenes in the film. I told these guys afterward, in fact, you know, as I write, I direct on the page, and I kind of dream this stuff. And a good day for me is just getting what was an approximation of what was in my head into the film camera. But then there are those days where things are better than you could have imagined, and that was one of those. That was one of those moments, and it's really because of this gentleman.
By accident, though.
I mean, tell me, we've never talked about it, and I'm kind of fascinated.
You wrote a scene that's required intimacy.
Yeah.
You can't like dictate that by the fact that he's going to be lit.
Of course.
In a certain way, so
no, it's silly.
It's not my fault if I'm going to then investigate that what you've written.
Absolutely.
Then you go, we can't say, well, we put a light there, so don't do the job.
Oh, never.
So well, but he's close.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So then we get into a conversation about, yes, now we're gonna get if that's the pursuit of investigation that you're happy to go down.
100%.
And that's where we think the work is going. Are we going to negotiate the light to get in the way of what you've written?
Never.
Right then. So I wasn't, but it was an accident. I didn't mean to walk up, but you did write something where he's handing, well, you know, the scene's potent, right?
Yeah.
And it could very easily be a speech of a bike. Hero walks in, other hero stands, and they pose.
Yeah.
And you have to fight posture and posing all the time, especially when you've got these iconic looks with leather jackets, hair.
Right.
Beautiful boys.
Right.
Me, obviously, exuding. So Studley good. But no, but there were genuinely, jokes aside, there were so many pitfalls that you have
pose.
to push away.
You had to break out of a pose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it
makes
looks
so
great,
much sense.
But it's like, in fact, in that case, and it wasn't
It's
like it
not
was
real.
it was just happened to be the I think the obstacle for the day was like, well, I need to get close to Austin. That's how I feel that this conversation is had.
Yeah.
Because he has to be rejected, and then he has to walk away again, back to his bike. So that's like the visual prospect. The literal proxemics were sort of unpacking themselves in real time.
It takes what could be a mundane scene and turns it into a very sensual scene. You know, it turns it into a very intimate scene, I guess, maybe.
There were other colours that came off of it, for sure.
100%.
But they didn't see that going in. It was just, it was
I didn't see it
conspiratorial,
coming.
and then it becomes a seduction, and then there's an element of devilry. There's all kinds of stuff within that close space.
Yeah.
And then if you look, I couldn't tell what the lights were doing to us. You can see that through the camera. So that was, you know, it's an unusual film, isn't it?
It's one of the parts that comes to life for me in a way that I honestly didn't see on the page. And we have to give credit to Austin too. He stayed right in it. Now, of course, he's on crutches.
Yeah,
but you know what I mean? There's not a sense in he doesn't flinch really. It adds.
When he holds the space, he keeps the tension.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah.
And he isn't big, or it's all micro. So it goes from a big, you have him walking from the fire, long walk. Every take you had him one long walk. And then I've got like a 6-foot walk to meet him. And then you close the gap. And he's left standing as Johnny returns to the bike. And you either stay on Austin, but eventually he's got to walk back because they can't stay in that space.
He turns his back on him.
Yeah, so yeah, that was a cool night.
Yeah, I found it very special. I mean, for me, it's, no pun intended, it's the engine in the middle of this plot. At some point, yes, it's amazing to have all these details and have all these different characters and have their personalities come through. But movies, they take place in the moment. You're trying thematically to show the structure of this club develop over the course of a decade. But movies take place in real moments, in real time. And what is that? And it's going to be this relationship. Obviously, from the interviews in the book, there's a relationship between Kathy and Benny. But my invention was adding Johnny into that mix and saying, okay, well, it's not these two guys fighting over this girl. It's actually these two people who really feel something for this young man. It became integral to, I guess, any semblance of a plot. But the tragedy built into that triangle is that, and there are other tragedies in the film, but built into that triangle is that this young man is not capable of holding the aspirations of these other people. I compare him to a glass with no bottom. People pour things into him and they just go right out the bottom. And so for me, it is really the heart of the film.
There's a rivalry between Kathy and Johnny over let's say, Benny. But it's the objectification of Benny and what Benny means to them both that gets tested as Benny reveals slowly what he may or may not want, potentially by the end of the movie. I'm not sure even if he does.
No, I don't think he ever enunciates it.
But they have a very advanced opinion of what he should or should not be. Right. And that puts them in a tacit kind of conflict against one another, where both his defense and his prosecuting attorneys, who haven't even been employed to be that, they're sort of arguing over something, it hasn't even been asked if he wants to be involved.
Right. I mean, I have to mention Goodfellas by Scorsese. Just structurally, I really admire that film. It also seems like a brilliant depiction of I shouldn't have said also. It is a brilliant picture of a subculture. And I thought a lot about that film as I was structuring this film and writing this film. But I'm actually not a cinephile. I'm not one of these directors that can pull up a shot and say, this is inspired by this film or that film. When it comes to the day and the work on the day, you're really just, looking at the material and looking at the people in front of you and trying to capture it in an somewhat honest way.
But you're the man in charge. I'm Sonny. I was hoping maybe to get a little food, a little drink, camp out for a night or two. Want to show a little class, contribute to the party.
Help yourself. This here's Brucey, it's Benny right there with the boot, and I'm Johnny. We're the Vandals.
Well, it's nice to meet you.
I'll just start with this one bit because I don't really explain it in the movie, but it applies to this scene. Danny talks about it in a forward. The term biker has become ubiquitous. But the truth is, in the Midwest in this period, they never used that term. They just said Bikeriders. And that's really where the title comes from. But why that's important in this clip is it feels like almost the Midwestern clubs were delayed. They were about 5 years behind the West Coast guys. And so they've heard of these West Coast clubs, they've heard of these guys, but they don't have a lot of interactions with them, And so in comes this stranger from the West, and he carries with him kind of all the mythology that comes from the West Coast. But it's an important part in the movie because it shows, it hints at the future of what, motorcycle culture, biker culture would become.
Do you know what? That was when you were playing Pagan Baby?
Yes,
Led Zeppelin.
you remember that. Creedence Clearwater.
Creedence.
Yes.
Oh my God, what a faux pas.
That's all right.
No, that was a really bad faux pas. I know who it was. Yeah, that was great because that was the first time I saw, and you put a speaker out so that everybody could revel, and it wasn't just the costume drama that we were filming.
Right.
And some of the guys were like, just went for it because and had fun as guys.
Yeah.
You know, like they were enjoying themselves, and the costumes started to come alive. Everybody started. The costumes started to not just fit, they meshed. And then the woods that we were in, everywhere you looked, there was no modern equipment apart from our camera equipment.
Right.
And those who may or may not be wearing Arc'teryx and filming equipment and clothes and rigging clips and stuff and walkie-talkies. The whole 360 degrees reconstruction in party.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a battle or it wasn't drama. It was different. It was a space that came to life of people socializing. That was a really, really fantastic moment to see something become recreated with the essence of authenticity to which was appropriate for the scene.
Absolutely.
People were letting loose, and the music was great. So then in comes Sonny and then Benny in his boot.
Yeah.
Because he's hurt his leg. But that was very much a 360-degree world that was then made small into with the individual conversations that were then going on. They go on to the fireplace later and then end up around the bike with the crushing blacks close up.
Yes, it's my favorite scene.
There's a Count Dracula moment.
Yeah, I loved it. But well, it's interesting to hear you talk about the impact of that music because I'm walking around with all that in my head, and it's cool to have it bleed out into the actual scene because I know what's going to come later. I'm going to put stuff like that on the movie, but to be able to share it with everybody was nice. And I suppose I need to talk about the extras that we assembled because they're partly responsible for giving that feeling. I mean, these people were excited about being there. A lot of the extras that we cast because they had period correct bikes. So these were guys that were already kind of obsessed with this world. And everywhere you looked, it felt like people were having fun, I think sometimes you look at extras and it's like, oh God, that's the worst job ever. But they genuinely seemed excited to be there. And it was a bit infectious, I think.
Yeah, it was. I don't think I've been in an experience, maybe Black Hawk Down, but that was a different 360-degree reconstruction because it was shooting and Humvees and helicopters, but it was innately detailed, and in physical it was mobile. There was a mobility of action, but in this it was a mobility of there was energy which was connected, and all the there was hundreds and hundreds of people there.
Yeah, it was a big
deep
day.
Background, close up, and then there was drama as well going seeded through it, which went into the night. So it was a big movement.
Big sequence.
Yeah, sequence. I learned to ride late in life. But I was always told by grown-ups when I was younger that I wasn't encouraged to do things that were necessarily that dangerous, like bikes. I didn't have anyone in my family that was really riding, so I got to it late. And that's what I like about riding, is that it's not, you have to be aware of, obviously you have to be very aware of what you're doing, but they're not out of reach. They're not so scary that you can't enjoy them sensibly. And so I wouldn't call it a passion, but I have a relationship with things that have an element of risk towards them. Like Jeff, I have a relationship with Jeff. There's an element of risk involved in that.
This is our club. We in this town here. We are all friends here. I don't know these guys.
You know them. We drank with them on that last run to Columbus.
Oh, yeah. I say no.
Well, I say we let him start a chapter. Hey, you said if any of us disagrees with you, we could challenge you, so?
So what?
So, I guess I'm challenging you.
Go yourself. Fists? Or knives?
What seems to be the problem?
And scene. You know, the thing I think about when I watch this scene is actually, it's the rest of the movie. I mean, there are all these decisions that this character makes that are gonna come back to haunt him. You know, he's really setting up his own fate. And in this moment, he's challenged, so it makes sense. There's logic there. He's not being illogical necessarily in this moment, but if you take a broader look at the character and the trajectory of that story, it's a bad moment for him. That's what I think about. I don't know.
For me, when I was working on the floor with the guys on that particular day, there's a lot going on to change the shift of the barometer in the room of a dynamic of a group which are being formed. And I think they're talking initially about having a telephone set up in the bar and what that means. There's a rowdy nature to the group that's trying to be corralled, and there's a frustration that they're not listening, and I think that's why he probably over-eggs it by placing a precedent from wherever the place comes from in him, which is an overreach, which comes back to haunt him. But there's a certain delicious wickedness that you can revel in playing it as a performer. But I also think it was a warning to go back to the beginning of the scene, to say be quiet.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and it was a failed attempt to draw order. Actually, it was a weak move.
Well, and also, you know, compared to where we find him later in the film, now he can yell that, and everybody zips up pretty quickly. It was kind of an amazing thing to watch, because all those guys really were. They were pretty rowdy, and the room was pretty boisterous, and they just zip it up like that. But later on in the film, you wonder if he has that ability anymore. You know?
Well, they know him.
Yeah,
that room is full of people who know him.
But that's
also his fear of like people not knowing him coming.
Right.
Is going to be, he won't have the ability to have a shorthand with them to say such silliness, because at that moment, if he said with the knives, he adds that in, which was a mistake.
Yes.
Because he could say that to a friend.
Yeah, right. Because he knows that guy won't take that. You know,
he won't go
there.
And he also knows what he does in the fight to him. It's not exactly. There's no Greensbury rules or whatever they're called in that aspect. He's playing in the gutter. But he's not the kind of guy who should be playing in the gutter, and that suit doesn't really fit him. Because if you hang around in a barber shop for long enough, you will get a haircut. And when you talk about knives and guns, and you're not from that world, it will find you.
It's one of the tricks of the film, I suppose. You know, I'd made this film before this one called Loving, that was based on real people, and I wanted very much to, you know, honor their story, and I didn't want to put anything in there that wasn't true. That was not the case here. If it was in Danny's book, it made it in the film. Beyond that, that's why I fictionalized the club. You know, I really didn't want to carry the responsibility of telling their story. I just wanted to, you know, tell the story of these people that were represented in the book. One other thing I'll say about the scene that's interesting is, and it's kind of off of what you're talking about, there's obviously tension in the room. You know, people, you know, they pipe down pretty quickly. But then this character says, you know, we're friends. We're all friends here. And it's like, it's just an interesting environment to make that comment. Because I do actually think he believes it. You discover this book, and it's not really a book. It's photographs, it's interviews. You're intrigued by it. The photos are romantic and interesting and detailed. And then the interviews are, you know, unvarnished and at times funny and at times cruel. You're just trying to figure out how to come up with a skeleton to hang all of these interesting details on. And that's really what took so long, was just trying to figure out the best way, what to fictionalize, what not to fictionalize, how to move things around so that it gave a semblance of the feeling you get when you look at the book. But it's obviously its own thing. It's its own art form. It just took me a while. This has been Esquire Freeze Frame, and the Bikeriders is out now.